Okay, hey everybody, let's get started here. I'm Scott McDowell. I'm really excited to be here for Using Video to Drive High Performance Culture. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Tribe Pictures, and I will be moderating, today's webinar, and also monitoring questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the GoToWebinar questions pane, and Vern and I will be attempting to keep the whole thing to about 45 minutes, including Q&A. So first, I'd like to introduce Vern. He is your host for today's webinar. Vern is the founder and creative director of Tribe Pictures. For 30 years, he has produced and directed strategic film and video for the Global 1000, as well as top colleges and universities across the United States, with the aim of helping to build high-performance cultures, which coincidentally or not is the topic of today's webinar. So hopefully you're in the right place.
Thanks, Scott.
Just a few pieces of business here before we get started. Vern is publishing a book. It is out next week. It's called Leadership in Focus, Bringing Out Your Best on Camera. I will link to it in the follow-up email to this webinar, as well as I would like to encourage you to pre-order it from Amazon. A lot of the information in the book sort of complements some of the material we'll be discussing today.
Absolutely.
Yes. There's also a page on our website dedicated to this webinar, tribepictures.com/culture, tribepictures.com/culture, where you can find all of the video examples that are referenced during the presentation and a bunch of other stuff as well. All right, so let's pass the mic over to Vern. And here he is, Vern Oakley.
Well, I'm very excited that everyone is here today, and I thank you for being on this journey. There's surprisingly little research around culture. It's just in its infancy. There's a lot of blogging about it, but not a lot of books or deep research, and we're going to try to pull that all together today. So we'll be talking about what is a culture and why it's crucial for business success. Scott, you want to add anything?
Yeah. So yes, we're going to be talking about what is culture, why is it crucial to business success, and then secondarily to that, what does an effective video strategy look like, and what are the keys to making video a transformational tool, turning it from a tactic to a strategy.
And I think as we start to bear down, people are going to hear the word storytelling quite a lot, because that really helps to that's what makes effective videos. Okay, so, and then next up, can I shoot this on my iPhone? Well, wouldn't everyone like to know that? I'm sure many bosses out there are thinking, can I hand an iPhone to my people and get the kind of videos I want? And then we're going to cover one thing you should never do and 3 things you should always do, which I think will be our summation of what we're planning to do. So I'd like to begin at the beginning, or at the top, as I like to say. What's on the CEO's mind? So being a CEO myself and having talked to hundreds of CEOs and researched and read about many CEOs also, I try to simplify it, and the CEO is really in charge of 3 things: the vision, the mission, the strategy. Another way that people are talking about is the why, or the purpose. So think about this as a pie chart, and that's 1/3 of what they're responsible for. The other 1/3 would be operational excellence, making sure that they're being efficient in their manufacturing. There's not a lot of rework, making sure that the customers are happy. The whole loop is really well done, from the exception to the completion. Everybody's happy. And then the 3rd element that the most enlightened and best performing CEOs are thinking about is culture. And all 3 of these things really do have to work together. And what I'd like to do by the end of this, I'd like to have you sort of have a new set of lenses that you're looking at, your everyday experiences through, and the videos that we are going to be sharing with you through the culture lens. And just to give you a couple of simple examples, I was directing a CEO once, and I went out to Silicon Valley to meet him, and I was walking up to the front door, and there was a beautifully handcrafted, hand-painted, 5-foot tall doghouse that he kept his dog in. So if you were to imagine what kind of culture that might be, yes, I'm thinking of a king. That was indeed the culture that I experienced as I went through and worked with this company. So what is culture, and why is it crucial to business success? So I like the Bain and Co. definition of culture. A company culture is at the heart at a competitive advantage because it determines how things are done and how people behave. It's the hardest thing for competitors to copy. Now, Peter Thiel, the venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, defines it a little differently. Every company is a culture. No company has a culture. I like to think about it in terms of you have the head, the heart, and the gut. And the gut is really where culture lands. There's a terrific Harvard Business Review discussion about this. Culture guides discretionary behavior, and it picks up where the employee's handbook leaves off. Culture tells us how to respond to an unprecedented service request. It tells us whether to risk telling our boss about new ideas and whether to surface hidden problems. Every employee makes hundreds of decisions on their own every day, and culture is our guide. Culture tells us what to do when the CEO isn't in the room, which of course is most of the time. And that's why we like to think about it as a gut instinct. So if you could imagine, a few companies out there that have interesting cultures, all diverse, but as soon as I name them, I think they're going to come up to you. So think about first Zappos, amazing culture. Think about the Navy SEALs. Think about Danny Meyer's Union Square Hospitality Group and the Shake Shack. Think about Apple, Netflix, Salesforce, Whole Food, Nordstrom's, and a couple of our clients, Stanley Black & Decker and American Express. Each one of those companies brings up a certain kind of experience for you and a certain kind of feeling. So as customers of those companies, you're part of the tribe that patronizes them, or perhaps even some of the people that work there. And let me give you a negative example that will sort of bring it into focus. Think about Dilbert, the cartoon. That's not the kind of culture that we want to create. That is not a high-performance culture. So just on a personal note, I was out shopping this weekend, and I went to a grocery store, and as I was checking out, the person that was scanning the items didn't look at me, started talking to the checker on the next aisle. It was kind of felt a little creepy, like I was not a human and they were not a human. And then I had to pick something else up, and I went over to Whole Foods, and the people were so friendly. We had a conversation, we were engaged. It's these everyday experiences that really create the kind of culture that turns into high performance culture and turns in the kind of monetary rewards and the growth that companies are seeking. So this is one of my favorite quotes about culture. I don't know if people know Peter Drucker. He's really the father of modern management theory. But what this is really about is it's a way for us to understand how important culture is, and that leaders at the top truly, when they grab onto culture and realize it's a differentiator, it can do so much. So if you think about, some of the research says right now 7 out of 10 people in your organization are not actively engaged at work. And what does that cost? So a disengaged workforce is estimated to cost in the US alone $450 billion to $550 billion. So to have people that are actually engaged in your company and engaged in your mission and engaged in your operational excellence and engaged in thinking about how to make you successful is a huge competitive advantage. We're going to talk a little later in the broadcast about how it helps with stock price too. Glassdoor has done some research on that. But I wanted to share a story that we've posted for you. It's a Planet Money story that was broadcast in NPR. We all know about Kobe beef in Japan and Angus beef in the US, but the Russians decided that they were going to enter the beef business. And there's an amazing story about what it took and how it was not successful to begin with until they changed their culture. It's called the Russian Rodeo, and we have a link to that on our website. It's about 18 minutes. I highly recommend that you spend some time with it, and particularly looking through this cultural lens. So if we start in terms of what's the purpose of business, it's to create and keep a customer, according to Peter Drucker. Now, you'll see that a lot of businesses and a lot of infographics like to put the customer at the center of the experience. And I think that's really, really important, but I think that only goes part way. So in terms of what's in 21st century business, the purpose of a 21st century business is to create, engage, and build your tribe. Now, we have a lot of people in business on the webinar, and we have a lot of people from the educational institutions on that. And so your tribe could be a lot of different things, but when you think about a company, it's not just your customers, but it's your employees, it's your investors, and it's the community in which you are licensed to operate. Or if it's a college, it's your professors and your faculty and your administrators and your alumni, and of course the community you're involved. So the great businesses really create, engage, and build the entire tribe. It's not just about making the customers happy if you really are trying to be successful and that. And so when we get to our video strategy, we're going to put the tribe right at the center. So when you think about your video strategy, it has to have a number of elements. It has to be strategic, and it has to be strategically aligned with the strategy that senior management and the CEO have defined, or your college president, or the head of your nonprofit organization. It has to be engaging. We like to say, do not bore. It has to be human. That's the way we feel real communication happens and real connection happens, is that you start to figure out how not to be so slick, how to be authentic, how to be real, and it has to be aligned. If one's to think of a culture like a family, just imagine, if mom tells you it's okay to, go out and ride your bike at night, but dad tells you it's not okay to go out and ride your bike at night, you don't have an aligned family culture. And that's really what happens in business and colleges, where you don't have this kind of alignment, where you're hearing different messages from different people. And that's why we think a video strategy is absolutely crucial. So for the people that are on the webinar and the people listening to this later, we like to think of you as you are the change agents. You are the storytellers. You're the people who can move these companies, move these colleges in the right direction. Just imagine what the world would be like if companies felt this kind of responsibility in terms of really living their values, their vision, their mission. It would be a much better planet. And as the people that shepherd those stories, I think we have a great responsibility. So the way we look at it is you have a video strategy wheel, and all of these need to work interactively. We're going to go through each one of them, and we have prepared and chosen a video, sometimes two, for each one of these categories that you can look at on your own at tribepictures.com/culture. And hopefully you'll be looking at it with these cultural lenses. And one of the things that we like to talk about is, because you're making these films for most important messages for your most important audiences, we like to say, could you please put yourself in the seat of the person who this video was intended for? These aren't broadcast videos. These aren't general entertainment. These are specifically made for certain kinds of audiences. And for those audiences, they've been very effective, and they engage those audiences, and they actually delivered on their recruiting mission or their investor relations mission or their leadership communications. And some of these examples will be things that we did, and some of these examples will be things that other companies have done. So, and all those of you that work in the video world know that video really is kind of magical. It's hard to walk into a bar and sort of not wind up looking at the television if it's there, and that so many of us spend so many hours on screens. I think the current statistic is almost 8 hours a day, which is shocking. But video has that magnetic pull, that multimedia with moving pictures, moving sound, to really take storytelling to, the pinnacle of what it's meant to be. So let's start off with leadership communications. First video that we're going to discuss just a little bit and tee it up so you can look at it is this introduction of Satya Nadella when he became the CEO of Microsoft. It's a 4-minute and 44-second video, and it's very well done. As a matter of fact, I analyzed that in my upcoming book, Leadership in Focus. And there are 11 key points that we go into. And as a gift today for being on the webinar or for signing up for it, we're going to actually send you that chapter. So you can do a little homework, watch the video. And a couple of things that I really like about it in terms of leadership communication, he's just so authentic. I mean, the interviewer starts out with the first question, who is Satya Nadella? And he actually opens up about his love of learning, and I immediately identified with him because he's talked about having purchased more books than he ever read. And I think we start with all good intentions. And as you look through the 11 things, there's a number of things that he does extremely well, and a few that I'd recommend that he change. But one is he's very vulnerable, and he's very casual, and he mentions having met his wife and having been at Microsoft his whole career. So, second type of video that I think goes in the strategy wheel, and all these things do need to work together, and all these things need to interweave your mission, vision, values, your why, consistently doing that. But in terms of a brand video, and Stanley is one of those companies that's listed on Fortune's 100 Best Companies to Work. This was a brand film that was made at the time that Stanley purchased Black & Decker. And when you think about your tribe, this video was not only made, was commissioned by Investor Relations, but it was made for the employees too, because there were a number of employees that were coming over from Black & Decker to join Stanley. And what was the company like? And in a regular brand film, we like to say that's who you are and what you do. But in a great brand film, it's who you are, what you do, and why you do it. And we came at it with a very different angle, and we actually tried to make these power tools and hammers emotional by weaving them into the fabric of our society, showing a Black & Decker drill on the moon being used, or showing Rosie the Riveter using some of these tools. And that's what we're talking about when you're humanizing these kind of things. And so as a litmus test, just in terms of, are you making the kinds of videos that are going to resonate with the audience, I like to say, if you, particularly with brand films, because these are one of the broader vehicles, would you take this home to your partner, your spouse, or your children, and would you show it to them, and would you be proud for them to see that you're part of that company? And that's the kind of viral videos we like to create that really, help people to understand, the company that you work for, and perhaps what you do, particularly if it's a B2B company, and they don't know what mommy or daddy does, and this is a common success story that our clients have told us about. So next up, recruiting and retention. So we talked earlier about how many employees were not engaged. So there are statistics that, you know, a highly engaged workforce has significantly less turnover. So the average turnover in a company is somewhere in the high 40s, but a really engaged workforce can be in the low teens. And turnover is incredibly costly. I know you people out there who are in HR understand this. So in terms of recruiting and retention, we're going to also talk about recruiting students for the college markets. We did this recruiting and retention film for KPMG, and it was aimed at experienced hires, not the recent college graduates, but people who'd been out in the workforce from 3 maybe to 15 years. And so it was important to speak to them in their language. It was important for them to understand that we knew what the real deal was like, that we didn't want to be slick or rah-rah. We wanted to discuss what, you know, would be what being there at this KPMG would be like. And so in terms of attracting and retaining and increasing productivity, you really have to sort of put the right stories out there to pull in the right people. And this particular story about Sean Hand, I just love. It's got one of my favorite opening lines in all corporate video. He starts out with, "When I was in tax, there were a lot of rock stars in tax." So if you watch it on YouTube, it has over 9,000 views, which I think is really good for a recruiting film in this space. And that he is somebody who was considering leaving the organization, and we were highlighting why he stayed there. So these are the kind of values that are interwoven into this video strategy wheel across all the kinds of videos that are done. Another one that I think you'll really enjoy watching is this is for University of Vermont, What It's Like to Be Here. Has over 60,000 views on YouTube. And what we did is we did a suite of films for the University of Vermont that helped to attract the right kinds of students for that. But one of the things that's really attractive about University of Vermont is Burlington. And so when we started to think about Burlington, we started to think about what would attract people. We thought music was key, and we researched a number of local bands, found Josh Panda, and we found a song that he liked. We contacted him. Our clients agreed that we could do an interesting format, a music video, and kind of delightfully show what the community was like in this music video, which now has over 60,000 hits and has done quite well in terms of attracting students to University of Vermont. So on this strategy wheel, and all these things, you know, tend to interact and they tend to overlap. I mean, we've made these artificial pull-aparts here because it's usually the way that people are commissioning this or buying them. But at the heart of a company, a heart of a culture, are the values, and particularly social responsibility. So, you know, these underpin a culture in a really important way, and they really are what attract people to doing business with you. And I named a list of companies at the beginning of this, and if you think about the values of the companies, they really start to surface, whether it's, you know, Whole Foods or the Navy SEALs. And so making these kinds of videos are crucial to letting people know in your company what's important. So this was a series of values videos we did for Hess, and they were commissioned a bit shortly after the disaster in the Gulf of Mexico. And so not all, I guess at that point in time, fossil fuel companies and oil companies in particular were not viewed particularly favorably. But what we really came to understand in going around and making these stories is that Hess had a different way of working, had a different set of values. And perhaps that's because it was started by Leon Hess, and then the next CEO was his son, John Hess. But I think to create a legacy, you really do have to be clear about what your values are. They can't be just a chart on a wall. I mean, look at Enron. I mean, they had a chart of values, which no one paid any attention to, obviously. So when you take and hold up the kind of values that you have and put them into the storytelling arena, you know, it's one of the things that statistically has been shown, one of the top 3 things that companies can do to create a high performance culture. Holding up the winners and saying, this is the way we want you to behave. So in terms of the fundraising and investor relations, we've grouped these together. And if you think about what these kinds of videos do, is in many ways they are brand videos, or they are strategy videos. They're helping people to understand, you know, what your college is like, what it stands for, why you should give money to it, what its mission is, or in the case of a company, you know, why it's a good investment. So in terms of the Glassdoor study, what I found is interesting is if you use, you know, best places to work as a proxy for investments, what's really interesting about that is that, you know, over the 4 years that we were measured, and this measurement was started in 2009, a portfolio of Fortune's best companies to work for outperformed the S&P by 84.2%, and a similar value by Glassdoor in that 5-year period outperformed the overall market by 115%. And if you want to flip it, the research also shows that if you look at the places that people aren't as happy as working at, you know, that they underperform the general market, not these high performers. They underperform the general market by 3%. So it's a holistic, your tribe's at the center, it's your employees, it's your customers, it's your community, it's all of your stakeholders. And when you get that all working together, you can build a very, very successful culture. So we have a couple of films here. This is one that we did for Hubble, and not the Hubble telescope. That's the first thing many people say, because it's not a well-known company. It is in the Fortune 500. It's about $3.5 billion of revenue. And it was a very complex story. This the kind of brand film that was needed for investor relations to show the big picture. You know, we came up with a phrase that helped them to, you know, make it simple for people to understand, which was to energize, enlighten, and empower. Because they're in 3 different divisions. They're in electrical, they're in lighting, and they're in the power business. And it's gone on to win a number of awards. And I want to talk to you a little about Hamilton, the first 200 years. So what attracts people to, you know, invest in companies, give colleges money? It's tapping in to the sort of DNA of the core, the value of who they are. You've heard me talking about that in terms of all our videos, and that's why the strategy wheel helps us, because you have to drive those elements through each of the videos. So this has a really interesting way into the story, because we discovered when we started to do the research for this, every year since 1865 there was a member of the 50th reunion class who would write about a reflection on what Hamilton had done for them in terms of living 50 years, you know, outside of the college. And that we read through, you know, a number of these since it was the 200th year anniversary to find the key elements, the core, the DNA that really made Hamilton special. And it was a very successful film, raising hundreds of millions of dollars. And I'm particularly proud of it because my daughter went to Hamilton and I got to put her in the film. So Now, the final category or bucket, really is sales and marketing. And I've picked a film that we didn't make because it personifies the journey that we all have, as storytellers, as filmmakers, as, videographers. Um, it's one of my favorite ads in the last 10 years or so, and it's the Apple Christmas 2013. And what makes this so special, and this will tie into our iPhone discussion later, is that it's a story of a family Christmas. It's a story of the Harris family holiday. Beautiful title, written in the snow, for the video, and it features an awkward teenager who is skulking around the edges of the family, not really participating with the family, and always on their phone, and people sort of make fun of him. They throw a hat at him because he's got his phone. And that the twist on this, and great stories frequently have a twist, is that he's been making a video of their family reunion the whole time. It feels like such a personal story to me as a filmmaker. I frequently wind up tearing up when I see it. I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. And it has, 639,000 views on YouTube. So, can you shoot on your iPhone? Well, I just gave you a whole video of somebody shooting on an iPhone, and the question is, are you skilled enough to tell a story by shooting on an iPhone? We recently had one of our clients, new boss came in and says, I want you to make all our videos on your iPhone. She called us in a panic. That's not everyone's skill set. And that, there are certain people that indeed can do that, but not many. And the way we sort of like to think about it in terms of the video strategy is, certain kinds of video require you to spend more money, more of an investment of time, more of an investment of strategy. Certain videos don't. And some of the videos that don't, that could be more playful, whether they be a retirement video or, a series of shots of people singing in a company song that are all shot and gathered together, can indeed be shot on an iPhone. But having made many, many films for our clients that were shot on things similar to iPhones or even iPhones, I can tell you, there's a very small percentage of people who are really good at making those. One thing you should never do, and 3 things that you should always do. Okay, so the one thing that you should never do is lie on video. I think it seems obvious, but people just don't necessarily know it. They think they can speak in hyperbole. They think they can communicate in a way that shows power. But I believe that we all have this sort of inner BS detector when we're seeing these kinds of videos, that we either respond to them or don't respond to them. We think you're telling the truth, or we don't think you're telling us the truth. And I talk about that in Leadership in Focus a lot, that true leaders communicate with authenticity. True leaders are vulnerable. True leaders reach out to us as human beings. And so since video, once it's published out there, it's out there forever, and there have been a number of interesting court cases where they've pulled in videos to see what people actually said in terms of corporate. Now, in terms of the 3 things that you always need to do, one of the things that I think is crucial is that you need to start with the audience. These are commissioned films that we're talking about here. And so if you can truly understand who the audience that you're trying to reach, and whether they're positively disposed to you or negatively disposed to you, whether the alumni just love the college or they haven't been actively courted, the state of mind that they're in and their receptivity to hearing the message is crucial. So we start with this key question: what do you want the audience to think after seeing the video, or to do, or to feel, or to buy, or to buy into? And if you ask yourself that question, you're going to make such a much better video. The second thing that we like to talk about that you always need to do is you need to start with outside-in thinking, which is starting with the audience, but also understanding the messages that you want to communicate. Many people start with inside-out thinking, which is like, here are 2 notebooks filled with all the messages I want you to see in this video. And what you start to understand is that people come to video to experience something that's emotional, something that's compelling, and that the research shows that most people only remember 1 or 2 or maximum 3 things in a video. And so you want to be focused on the most important messages. So if you can think about what you want to touch those audience members with, and so I like to say it's not inside out thinking or or outside in thinking, it's really both. Because you do have a message you want to get across, but if you don't start sort of outside in, you're not going to get to the right message, and you're not going to simplify it. And then the third thing that's crucial to do, particularly in terms of a video strategy, is that you need to consistently weave in the mission, the vision, the values, the why across all of your films, whether they're for investor relations or whether they're for recruiting or whether they're for sales and marketing. Because this research shows that it takes somewhere between 7 and 13 times for somebody to actually hear a message. And if we're not consistently and constantly having a video strategy that's around what your company is about, around what your college is about, that it's not going to touch people, it's not going to move the needle, and people won't know who you are and what you're about. So I want to move into a couple of tools that we have for you and a couple of free things that we're going to give you on this website. Scott, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Vern. There's tons of information in there, and thanks for that, Vern. I want to implore you all, if you have any questions, please do so, ask them in the questions pane in the GoToWebinar app here on your computer. We'll get to questions in just a moment. First, I would like to let you know, so Vern provided you the bit of homework to watch those videos and kind of think about your own video strategy. I would also like to ask from you if you have any examples of videos that you would like to share with us. We're constantly collecting sort of the best examples of videos in these categories in the strategy wheel. So if you have any examples that you love, please forward them our way. In the next, I'd say 24 to 48 hours, I will send you a recording of this webinar, as well as a few resources that may be helpful in taking the next step kind of in your own video strategy. The first one is a video strategy assessment. It's kind of a worksheet, checklist document that you can use. You can go through and fill it out on your own, and should be helpful in sort of just taking those first steps as to thinking about this in a holistic way, not just making a video, but thinking about how this video strategically affects your business, thinking about it holistically. And then the second thing is a free chapter of Vern's new book, Leadership in Focus. It's going to be the chapter that Vern was referencing earlier in the webinar about Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. There's a real evaluation and breakdown of that particular video, and also Satya's performance on video, which is something that Vern talks about a lot, and is really a main topic of the book. It's about how leaders perform on camera. We see people performing on camera in every walk of life, and it's kind of it's no longer a nice to have for CEOs and executives to be comfortable on camera. I would also like to take the opportunity now to mention that if you would like to work with Tribe, there's sort of a low bar way to do that without buying a whole video production, and that's something that we call the video strategy diagnostic. What that is the Tribe team will take a look at your video assets and your current video strategy and kind of offer a comprehensive evaluation, including next steps, so you can start to take matters into your own hands. whether it's because you don't have the budget to kind of build out a video strategy with a company like Tribe, or because you're a do-it-yourselfer and really feel like you have the tools and the ability to create a holistic video strategy on your own. And it's kind of a way, I like to think of it as a way of getting Vern's 30 years of experience to work on your own projects without buying the whole farm, as it were. And that's it. We have a couple questions that came over the transom prior to beginning the webinar, and maybe I'll get to those. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask away. But this question, the first one, is one, Vern, that we get all the time, and it is about budgets, and it's about the cost of video versus the investment. And it's sort of like, I'd love to do this. This makes a lot of sense to me. Video strategy makes sense conceptually, but I don't have the funds. I don't have the budget. So what do I do?
Well, we're happy to work with you to help you figure out how to shake the money tree at your company or college. That there's some research that's just starting to be done, and we're on the leading edge of this as to what's the ROI on video. So the way I like to say it is a business proposition. If I give you $1 and you give me $2 back, how long will I keep giving you $1? I think it's forever and ever. So if we can prove our worth through the storytelling capabilities for what video does to the culture, for what video does for the fundraising, the money can be gotten. And frequently it's a matter of coordinating through different departments to fund things. I mean, one of our proof points is that we've helped our colleagues, working closely with them to raise $7 billion for colleges in the fundraising times we've done. And we've offered to do those videos for free because we know how effective they are, and we would just take a percentage. And that when you put culture at the top of the three things that the CEO needs to work on, or the president of your college, you start to realize that if video can help me build this culture, that there should be money for it because it's an investment. Unfortunately, most videos really don't get results. Most videos in this category are kind of meh to not very effective to boring, and that the difference between what gets results and what doesn't really does have to do with the experience and understanding that. And I do think the video needs assessment will really help move people forward on that.
Great, thanks. Thomas asks, is there anywhere I can go and watch the entire presentation? You missed the beginning. There is a way. I will email out to all the attendees and registrants of the webinar the recorded replay of today's webinar, so you can have that, and as well as a few other resources. One other question here that we frequently get is about getting started doing video. And I wonder, Vern, if you have any suggestions in terms of companies that come to you and say, what's the first step?
Well, the first step, as we discussed, is there really has to be a need. There has to be some action that you want from the audience. And if the need is big enough, then it may be worth making a video. It's not always worth making a video. Sometimes it's a conversation or a PowerPoint or a speech or a town hall or something other than a video. But if the need is big enough and the audience is dispersed and you want to invest the time, energy, strategic thinking into that, what you'll find is that it can be very, very effective, because we all know this, but sometimes we forget it. When you push the play button, that video message is available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That it plays the same message, which has been vetted, approved, maximized, crafted again and again and again, which is different than what it is when somebody's out there giving a speech. Some days we have a good day on the speech, and some days we don't have such a good day. So I'm not sure I answered the question fully. Did you?
Yeah, no, it's kind of about attention. When people try to do videos, they don't feel like it gets the attention that it deserves. And it's like, how do I get started in terms of building out a strategy around it? And but I think you did answer that over the course of the presentation for sure.
Well, I would say also in terms of the strategy wheel, the reason we started that is because you can start anywhere on that. And ideally, whether you're starting with a recruiting film or a brand film or investor relations film, that they're going to dovetail, and that when you do the kinds of videos that we're suggesting, you build your own custom libraries. And that you're constantly reinforcing the values, the vision, the mission of your organization in a way that does build a high performance culture. So, the key to starting is to make the first one.
Great. Vern, if you could just go to the next slide there, the question slide. It has our contact details if anyone would like to get in touch. Okay, there's another question coming through from Leah. Would you recommend reusing a previously effective video or repurposing, or does it make sense to start from scratch again?
Boy, we repurpose a lot of video, and I think it depends upon the ultimate, what's the use that you want, and who is the audience. And if the audience hasn't seen the video before, then it's brand new to them. If the audience has seen the video before, sometimes it may feel like, oh, that feels kind of familiar. But if you can put it in use the footage, putting it in a new context to help you with a new communication or a new ask, I think it's fine to use those kinds of videos again.
Yeah, there was actually a recent example of that we did for a college where they had done a fundraising film a few years ago and then wanted to repurpose the same footage to create a student recruiting film a few years down the road. And so those kind of stories are very common. It's common to reuse footage and create something new out of, especially if the footage you get originally is great. Here's another question from Troy. A lot of our executives aren't very comfortable in front of the camera. Do you have any suggestions on loosening them up and making them more comfortable?
Troy, thanks for asking that. It's why I wrote the book. I've worked with hundreds of executives and thousands of real people, and I actually started my career in the theater. So I brought all these theater techniques into this thing, and a lot of it has to do with establishing rapport. A lot of it has to do with creating a safe environment on the set. And we're used to the lights and the cameras and the sound person and all that, but from fresh eyes, it looks like you're entering an alien minefield here. So getting people to be comfortable. I like to introduce these executives to the crew if I can make a human connection with them. I like to here's one of my secrets I'll share with you. I like to put them in charge. And what that means is, hey, if you're not comfortable, you can stop anytime you want. If you don't like your answer, let's begin again. And so all of a sudden, I am, sort of transferring control of their performance to them by closely monitoring it. And I'd say the other number one thing that most people forget to do when they're in front of the camera, or even giving a webcast, is to breathe. So I'm constantly reminding people, take a deep breath. And the other thing that I do is sometimes I'll actually make mistakes right in front of them so they see that it's okay to make mistakes. I'll drop my notebook. I'll mispronounce a word and then correct myself so that they understand that this is a safe environment. And lastly, if we think about some of our favorite moments in movies, they're not always in the movies. They are in the credits where people do the outtakes. And so if you can create that environment where people can make mistakes, can laugh, can be in control, it changes how these executives really feel.
Yeah, and one of the other things is that we talk about a lot is editing. So one of the things we have on camera that's different from an executive speaking in front of the room at a podium is that there are second chances. So oftentimes we'll have several cameras, 2 or 3 cameras, so we'll be able to cut in and sort of change things in the editing process, which takes a little bit of pressure off the person that's on camera. That it's not, you don't have to get it perfect, you don't have to get it right the first time necessarily. A couple other questions here. Michael says, do you like to use a teleprompter when you shoot an executive?
Teleprompters are a mixed blessing or a curse. Teleprompter is a mechanical device which runs the script on a transparent mirror which is in front of the lens, so the executive is reading off of that. I imagine most of the people in the audience understand that. But the key here is the word reading, because what happens when we read, we go into a different part of our brain than when we're just having a conversation. And so, unless you have enough practice, it will always come off like somebody's reading, and you can, always tell when somebody's eyes are shifting right and left. There is a trick which is enlarging the type so it's kind of more centered so they don't look that way. And that in my experience, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times somebody's on a teleprompter, it's really not that good. It's like learning to ski. And there's a great chapter in the book about teleprompters and techniques to use when you're putting people on teleprompter. But I know some executives that are great on them. Not many.
Okay, couple more here. Oh, here's another teleprompter question, actually, which maybe you answered, maybe you didn't. How do you get the executive to speak naturally on a teleprompter?
Well, a couple of the things that I like to do is, there's a script for the teleprompter, and I like to have a hard copy of the script. And so before the executive comes, I perform the teleprompter script, and you'll be surprised how many of the writers of these scripts have not read them out loud, and how many tongue twisters there are. So I try to go through and I will enlarge words, I will underline words, I will put phrases together, I will move the text on the teleprompter, and I perform it like I perform like an actor. I perform it, so I'm reading it, and then I try to get the people that my clients working with to modify the script sometimes, and then when the executive comes in, I like to let them read the script on a piece of paper, so that they actually get used to it. And I always say, hey, let's work on this together, because they have to be comfortable saying the words, and that knowing how quickly the world of business operates, frequently these executives have not even had a chance to read the script or prepare for the script. So if we make it a working session, right off the bat, they're changing this word or that word, and I would rather have a working session that's 20 minutes and 10 minutes with them to record the teleprompter than a half hour of them just reading a script that they've never read before.
Great. Couple more here. We've got one now from Eduardo from Brazil. He asks, how much effort and outside help goes on the script? Do you always have it ready before shooting?
I'd love to tell you yes, Eduardo, and it's great to hear from you, my Brazilian friends. I've been in situations where we're setting up, the script's presented, outside of the room where we are to the CEO, and they, I don't like the script. So we have 30 minutes to rewrite the script. And that we always try to work with our clients preparing these scripts prior to shooting. And we always like to have them to read the script and agree to the script beforehand. And ideally, the process begins with what's important for you to communicate. Working with a communications officer and talking to the CEO and us. That's very rare, though, honestly. But when it does happen, it makes a world of difference, because you know exactly what they want to talk about, and you're highlighting how they want to say it.
Excellent. So one more question, is that all right?
One more, okay.
All right, so yeah, we wanted to keep it to 45 minutes. I guess we went over, but can you talk more about casting? If a company has 3 or 4 people who must be in the film and 1 or 2 aren't good with the camera, how do you handle this?
Well, in Hollywood, they like to say, directors say that, casting's 90% of it. If you get the right actor married to the right part. We don't have that luxury, particularly if it's the CEO. They're cast. But usually if it's not the CEO, sometimes we're given more leeway in casting, or we like to set it up as an important consideration, and that we think that one of the greatest values that we add in terms of tribe is taking the strategic messages, the key informational points that you want to communicate, and finding the right person that can do those messages. So when you look at Sean from KPMG, we wanted to talk about mentoring, we wanted to talk about career choices, we wanted to talk about somebody who really was thinking of leaving the company but decided to stay and found the right thing. That's a casting decision that's based upon a strategy. So we also like to position casting up front as, hey, could you give us more people to interview and talk to? This will help us understand the problem, and then from those people we will pick the cast. So if we start, and that we look at it as an informational gathering session, because some people that you may not cast or may not be good on camera may give you great information, and you can actually ask those kinds of questions of other people. And then I guess lastly, we like to say, if we shoot somebody, do we have to use them in the video? And the answer is usually 50-50. You have to use everyone, and some people say, no, you don't have to use everyone. So it's so we try to keep them on camera, and we try to keep them on camera for their most human, their most real, their most powerful moments, and then carefully cut the audio track off camera with B-roll to say what needs to be said.
All right, great. And saying what needs to be said, I guess that will be where we end today's webinar. Thank you everyone for tuning in and showing up. We really appreciate it. If you'd like to get in touch, the contact page is there. We'd be willing to answer any questions that you may have. Thanks a lot, Vern.
Thank you, Scott.